Question number 2, Metiria Turei.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Economic Development and asks, on what date did the issue of compensation in the event of future reform of gambling law first arise in the negotiations over the SkyCity Convention Centre, and which party raised it?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, negotiations with SkyCity began in June 2011 and they were undertaken on a commercial basis by ministry officials and advisors with the company. As the member may appreciate, the nature of negotiations is such that issues are often raised in an informal way around a negotiating table and are not necessarily recorded. As Minister for Economic Development, I was not involved directly in those negotiations and am therefore not aware of every suggestion that was made or when they were made. However, in order to be of assistance to the member, I think it is fair to observe that given that the company was being asked to build a very large convention centre and operate it for 35 years, the issue of what compensation would be arise if Parliament subsequently altered the concessions would have come up fairly early on.
Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I appreciate that there is a partial answer to this question, but this question was put on notice. It asks on what date. That was not answered. When I asked this question of the Prime Minister yesterday, he expressly referred me to Minister Joyce as the person who would know the answer to that question. I expect an answer on what date did the issue first arise.
The difficulty the member has with the question is I accept she asked for a specific date, but the Minister quite clearly in his answer said he was unable to provide a specific date. The discussions occurred over a long period of time. They moved from informal type discussions to more formal, and therefore there is no specific date recorded.
Order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Dr Russell Norman.
Mr Speaker, speaking to the point of order, the issue is that the Minister has previously made public statements identifying that it was SkyCity that raised this question, not the government, and hence the Minister is always already on the public record identifying at least the answer to one part of this question, and presumably must have information about the other part of the question as well. It's not consistent for him to argue both sides of the coin.
Well, I'm sorry, but I don't accept the point the member's making. The Minister was I was listening very carefully. The Minister was quite careful in explaining why he was unable to give the specific date that the member asked. The member has further supplementaries if she wishes to use them.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Given the Minister's answer that the issue was raised some time ago, does he then agree that Nigel Morrison of SkyCity was incorrect when he blamed the New Zealand Power announcement 4 weeks ago for supposedly spooking him into seeking compensation, when, in fact, as the Minister has confirmed, compensation was already on the table for some time?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I can confirm a couple of things to the member. Firstly, I think the general concept of compensation has been there for some time. If the member's had a look at the heads of agreement, she will note that the one aspect of the compensation is in regards to the gambling levy while the convention centre is being built, which is over a different time frame until up to 4 years after the convention centre is built. And my understanding is that particular element came up quite late in the process. I can't give you the exact date, but nor would I necessarily be able to contradict Mr Morrison in that regard.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Has his department given up keeping file notes of important meetings and requests?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, and as far as I am aware, they haven't given up keeping those notes, but no, they were asked to check and couldn't identify a specific date.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei. Order. Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Given the issue of compensation has been on the negotiation table for some time, doesn't he believe that the public have had the right to know that the price of this deal was 35 years' worth of compensation if the public decided they wanted to change gambling law?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm not quite sure where the problem that the member has raised, because exactly the point is that the discussions took over a period of time. We didn't discuss how those discussions were going, or I think certain members of the media might have committed us to a larger number of pokie machines than eventually was agreed. So we said, well, we will talk about that at the end, and we've now presented the arrangements to the public. The Parliament will get an opportunity to debate those arrangements, and then we'll have a decision as to whether to pass them or not.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Was the Minister deliberately keeping the compensation provision secret until this past Monday because he knows that there is likely to be serious public concern that their right to make gambling law reform in the future will now come at a multi-million-dollar price tag for the next 35 years?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
No, the member is incorrect, and I think it's important that I point it out to her because she's made these statements a number of times in the media and she's wrong. The reality is the compensation relates to the specific concessions that are identified in the agreement. They do not relate to harm minimisation and other aspects of gambling policy. For example, do you want to hear about it or not? For example, the problem... Well, you'll learn something, Grant. The problem gambling levy...
I have a point of order from the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, it is absolutely inappropriate for the Minister to bring you into the debate and ask you whether you want to hear about it. And, Mr Speaker, I ask you whether it is appropriate for the Minister who has just breached to breach again by interjecting during a point of order.
No, the member is quite right. Points of order should be heard in silence, and no Member of Parliament should bring the Speaker into the debate. But to be fair to the Minister, he was responding to a level of interjection from the opposition benches. Further supplementaries? Supplementary question, Metiria. Order.
Sorry, point of order, Mr Speaker. I'd like the opportunity to complete my answer if I could, because it's a very important point.
Point. Yeah, and the Minister can continue with his answer.
As I was saying to the member, it's important to note that the issue of compensation is only in relation to the specific concessions laid down in the agreement, and in terms of items such as further changes to harm minimisation, further changes, for example, to money laundering laws, further changes to the problem gambling levy. All of those are able to be made for the entire 35-year period without any recourse by SkyCity.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Under the heads of agreement, how much money would New Zealanders have to pay SkyCity if they wanted to outlaw cashless gaming technology such as ticket in, ticket out, which is currently illegal in New Zealand, because, for example, it increases money laundering? How much would the taxpayer have to front up for if they wanted to outlaw cashless gaming under this deal?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, the member has listed one of the concessions that, of course, does apply for compensation. And I would point out to the member, though, well, that's what I said exactly at the front. I said, apart from the specific items raised, then all other aspects can actually be changed. In terms of changing ticket in, ticket out, or cashless gaming, as a member puts it, which, of course, is available not only here in New Zealand now, but also across all Australian states, the reality is, of course, Parliament can choose to change that, and there would be an element of compensation because that is part of the concessions granted to SkyCity. I don't have the number in front of me, but part of the concessions granted. But it's laid down in the Court-Amenta report.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister confirm then that as the Minister responsible for this deal, he cannot tell the New Zealand public what their potential financial liability will be under the heads of agreement for any future changes in gambling law reform that affect the concessions provided to SkyCity by him under this deal? He does not know how much it will cost.
Honourable Stephen
Well,
Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I could, but it would take up a fair bit of the House's time because there's quite a Court-Amenta report. If the member wants to make some specific requests, if she is unable to deduce it from that report, I'm more than happy, if she wants to put them down in writing, to address them for her.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
Why were the independent consultants Court-Amenta not instructed to also consider the costs of the social impacts of increased gambling harm caused by the gambling law concessions in the deal, as they have specifically noted that were excluded in their report?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, because that is Cabinet's responsibility to make that assessment relative to all other aspects. The specific requirement that we asked of Corda Mentha was to assess the economic considerations to ensure that at the economic level between SkyCity and the government that the arrangements were fair to both parties. The social considerations are very much a matter for Cabinet to consider when weighing up the decision.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Metiria Turei.
What has the advice to Cabinet been then as to the costs, the financial and social costs to New Zealand from the gambling law concessions that are part of this deal? And if he does not have this figure, how does he justify telling New Zealanders that this is a good deal if he cannot tell them how much it will cost, both from the compensation and from the financial and social costs of increased gambling harm?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Well, Mr Speaker, there isn't an actual number, and the reason for that is that nobody has been able to define, for example, how any element of gaming necessarily increases the amount of problem gambling harm in the community. That's the reality of it. Well, in actual fact, it's a little bit different to cigarettes for the somewhat challenged ones on the opposition, because actually there are some people for whom any aspect of gaming is actually causes a problem, and they have access to a range in the community, and there's no evidence to suggest that adding or subtracting one individual, for example, pokey machine at a casino or anywhere else, has any effect on its own on problem gambling.
Question number 3, David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime